Hi, everyone. David Aragona and Scott Shapiro here, taking a look at the DRF Wednesday race of the day, which comes at Turfway Park. It is actually opening day of the 2025-2026 Turfway Park meet. We're going to focus on race 8. It is a first level allowance slash $25,000 optional claimer. This one going 6.5 furlongs on the all-weather course for the fillies and mares. And Scott, happy to have you on board to handicap this opening day feature at Turfway, because fair to say you've handicapped many more Turfway races than I have during my handicapping career.
I probably have that one up on most folks in the world, I know, but especially even the niche handicappers that we are, since I definitely covered one full meet there and some other parts as well. But I can tell you, I don't know how much of an advantage that's going to be in this race. It's a full field, which is the norm pretty much, especially in the holiday meet, but there is very little all-weather form here to go off of. So I think a lot of guessing, but hopefully we'll guess right.
Yeah, and as we get into the field for this race, Scott, I mean, as you pointed out, not a whole lot of form, especially among the favorites. The two horses that are pegged as the shortest prices on the morning line, the number 3, Cut to the Chase, as well as the number 9, Kinane, both horses that will be making their synthetic debuts in this race. So some guesswork to be done. And Scott, as somebody who's handicapped a lot of Turfway races, do you put a lot of stock in prior form over an all-weather course, or Turfway Park's all-weather course specifically?
I am very leery from what I've learned over the years on moving all-weather form from one track to another.
Mhm.
Woodbine is the one that I've noticed most specifically does not seem to translate. But I would say overall, you want to see the Turfway Park form. And you want to use trainers, I think, too, David, not to make this about the whole macro level of Turfway handicapping, but trainers that point to this meet can be a big angle. Some trainers are really pointing this meet good purses. Some of their trainers are maybe sending their second and third strings here to kind of have them somewhere to go for the winner.
Yeah, I think tips like that are really helpful to just keep in the back of your mind as you're handicapping some of these races. Don't let it make all your decisions, to track profiles and what assumptions that you make about races, the way races play out at racetracks, but something to maybe, split a tiebreaker if you're trying to decide between a couple of horses in a race. Well, let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector for this 8th on Wednesday. And one of those horses that pegged at a short price on the line, the number 3, Cut to the Chase, one of 2 Wesley Ward trainees in this race. This filly has shown a lot of early speed on the turf and the dirt. We'll see if that translates to the synthetic here. And Scott, there is a little bit of other speed drawn outside of her, though one of the other horses that could be forward is another Wesley Ward rider, the number 10, Bunchen.
Yeah, exactly. And you look at the rider on that, as we'll talk about that one later. Walter Rodriguez, maybe a little bit less aggressive than some other riders and an outside post. So I would think that one is pretty unlikely to press the stablemate into defeat. I think it's going to be an honest pace with Cut to the Chase in there. I wouldn't go as far as saying that this is going to be a cutthroat battle on the front end.
I agree with that. She seems like clearly the fastest early, and we'll see how fast she runs off from the field. Well, let's go through this field from the rail out, and I'll mention as we start to go through these horses and the handicapping, you can handicap along with Scott and me using the free PPs for this race that are available on DRF.com, with this being the DRF Wednesday race of the day. First up is the number 1, Mom's Cheesecake. And Scott, this is one of those horses that does have prior Turfway Park form. Only won a $15,000 maiden claiming race when she won at this meet last winter. But it does feel like at least she's improved a lot since then as a later developing 3-year-old. I don't know if she's improved enough to win at this level, but maybe she's a horse that can do a little better getting back on the synth.
Yeah, likely to just save ground early, come with one big run. Looks like the first mount here for a guy that's had a lot of success at Turfway, Luan Machado, his brother, I believe, Dylan Machado. So we'll see if he, it's a little bit of an interesting course to ride. We'll see if he gets some hints from his brother. Maybe this one can pick up the pieces at a big price.
The number 2, Brienne of Sky, is the least experienced of the 12 runners in the main body of this field. She'll be making just the second start of her career after winning on debut at Hawthorne. We can take a look at the stretch run of that race. And Scott, I thought that she got a good education here. You could see she's kind of having to weave through traffic to try to find a clear path. She's a little bit green, ultimately gets up at the end and was just superior to this field. I got to say, when I look up this race in Formulator, I don't really love the competition that she was facing, but this is one of those barns that can be pretty dangerous on the synthetic course at Turfway.
Yeah, Doug Cowens, William D. in the forum, definitely capable of winning there. For a while, it was the meet for him. Now he's kind of branched out a little bit more. Winning on debut from off the pace is good, but 5 furlongs versus 6.5, a different surface, big price. Could get better with the more ground, but I think, like you said, the competition gets a lot tougher here.
The number 3, Cut to the Chase, the horse that's pegged as the morning line favorite. And I kind of understand why, based on the last race where she earned a big speed figure, winning her maiden race at Keeneland. Second time out, we'll take a look at the stretch run of that race. She had debuted on the turf at Ellis Park, where she showed a lot of early speed, faded at the end of that grass race. She was able to sustain her speed much better over this dirt course at Keeneland and beat a pretty good rival. The runner-up came back to win, improving her Beyer speed figure by 10 points. So validates this race. But Scott, what do you make of the surface switch? Is Wesley Ward is just checking all the boxes, going from turf to dirt, now to synth in just her third start.
Yeah, you never know exactly how it's going to go with these. I'm not big into the pedigree personally of it.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of look at turf form, but one thing it looks like this is not necessarily the way it was planned for a $375,000 purchase for Wesley Ward. Didn't debut till the summer of her 3-year-old campaign. Wesley likes to get his runner started early, and then last time beat a decent field like you said, but had things her way that day. So to me, Wesley 45 of 168, which is obviously good numbers at Turfway over the last 3 years, but just a 169 ROI. You're not making money betting on fillies like this, horses like this. I'm going to let her beat me.
Does get Irad Ortiz aboard. At least that's the name jockey. I guess you never know who's actually going to ride these Wesley Ward horses. Been not a lot of experience riding a Turfway for Irad, but he definitely is one of the top jockeys in the country. The number 4, Malibu Muse. Maybe she's the biggest thorn in the side of Cut to the Chase because she's drawn right outside of her, and she feels like the second fastest horse in the early stages of this race. She did win going gate to wire over the synthetic horse, but that was at Presque Isle Downs 2 back and didn't feel like she was beating the strongest field there. She tried a tougher group at Churchill last time, a race that a few of these come out of. She chased the pace, faded at the end. She's just going to have to show a little more staying power in this spot.
Yeah, she's unlikely, like we were talking about, to be loose like she was in that win 2 back, which would be her best chance to win this race as she tries to get the 6.5 furlongs. Good to see her, involved early to show that she has the speed against quality competition. Last time out against first level allowance foes at Churchill. But I just don't see really the trip or the scenario. Although Gabriel Saez is likely to be pretty aggressive out of the gate. So that might be a thorn in the side of the 3.
The number 5, Loris, will appreciate any pace that develops up front because she's really turned into a one-run closer at this stage of her career. That's the way that she ran last time out at Churchill Downs over the 5 furlongs, where she was back in last early, tried to launch a wide run around the far turn, and felt like she got there in mid-stretch, Scott, and she just kind of flattened out at the very end of that race. And personally, that makes me a little bit concerned about her getting the 6.5 furlongs here. And also, she's one that's trying the synthetic for just the second time in her career, but she did run well over at Gulfstream last winter for whatever that's worth if it translates.
Right. I mean, I could see building some wagers around her in the back end, the back end of exotics. The distance is a question mark. I will say the rail was good that day, so her trip wasn't ideal at Churchill. But yeah, just the way George Weaver has managed her makes you wonder if 6.5 is stretching her out. And George Weaver would be a barn that I would be a little leery on. 0 for 6 only at Turfway over the last 5 years. You never know. Some of these barns could change their strategies here and send here. The purses are big and all weather is coming to New York and whatnot more. So, there could be reasons, but that's just something to consider.
The number 6, You Ain't That Lucky, is going to be a big price in this race, and she does have a victory over synthetic previously. That was at Presque Isle Downs, where she broke her maiden at odds of 1-2, so I don't think she was beating much of a field that day. And since then, a couple of tries against winners, not earning speed figures that come close to what's going to be required to be competitive here. I guess the best thing I could say about her, Scott, is that she's going out for one of the most underrated trainers in Kentucky, at least in my opinion, in Kelsey Danner.
Yeah, 330 some starts this year and a positive ROI. Kelsey does a good job, and this is one of her bigger ownership groups, NBS stable. But I don't think it's going the way they hope with this exaggerator filly. I see it the same way. The field she beat, she was 1-2 coming off all of those efforts you see before it. So it kind of tells you what kind of field she was beating.
The number 7, Surprise, when making her first start on the all-weather course, as well as her first start in the barn of trainer Tom Amoss, who's not really a trainer, who's known for having a lot of success in synthetic races. He's just 3 for 35 on synthetic, all tracks over the past 5 years. This horse, she was claimed for $40,000 in her third start against winners. She finished third in all 3 of those starts against winners since breaking her maiden, and just don't really see the class or form lines that make her quite competitive against this group, Scott.
Right. And she's already lost at short prices multiple times. And, we're talking about the trainer kind of angles. You mentioned Tom Amoss, not necessarily one that has a lot of success on synthetic. I find it hard to believe they claimed for 40. He and Maggie Moss that have had a lot of success without the plan to take this down to fairgrounds. So this seems like a negative, training in India, Horseshoe Indian, going to Turfway instead of fairgrounds.
The number 8, Safira, is pretty lightly raced. Another one making just the 3rd start of her career. She did win on debut at Horseshoe Indy on the turf, where she rallied from towards the back of the pack to get the job done in a pretty professional effort for a first-time starter. And she's another one, Scott, coming out of that Bunratty Manor race at Churchill Downs last time, where she got a good trip until the quarter pole. I was wondering what you made of the stretch run, because it felt like she was never fully clear to launch a bid in the race.
That's what I felt. I felt like she didn't have, the easiest of trips. It wasn't a major excuse, but when you take into account it was her first start against winners without a super clear trip, I liked that she broke a lot better in that race. So the way I'm looking at this filly, I wouldn't be shocked if she doesn't fire at all over the all-weather, but she's bred to want more ground than the 5 furlongs. She gets Julian Le-Peru, who should fit her running style pretty well here, and hopefully she just gets a cleaner, kind of like a mid-pack run instead of being way out of it early or a little bit too close up to the early pace.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what to do with her debut race because I didn't love the field that she beat, but I liked the visual. American Pharaoh does have pretty good stats on the synthetic. The number 9, Kanane, another horse who's going to take money in this race. She'll be trying the synthetic for the first time, like the Wesley Ward trainee, cut to the chase. This one, though, has had a lot more chances in her career racing on dirt and turf, and it does feel like turf has been her preferred surface, and she's really taken a step forward on that surface since getting claimed by Brad Cox for $40,000 earlier this year. She's got some solid form recently in New York. We'll take a look at the most recent of those races where she closed for second as the even money favorite in a high price starter allowance race. I will say, Scott, following the New York circuit closely, she had been entered a couple of times in 1 mile and an eighth races on the turf that didn't get to go because of weather related reasons in New York. So this is kind of plan C for her to now run in the synthetic sprint at Turfway. So make of that what you will. But if she translates the turf form, I think that she fits here.
Yeah, that's the thing. It seems like she might not be a great bet when you look at it, but everything else, she fits perfectly with this field, assuming she takes to the all-weather because, like you said, the Turfway form's been good. They claimed for 40. They've protected her ever since. So I see her as the likeliest to run her race, but at 3-1 on the morning line, and I'm glad you pronounced the name for me beforehand, but on 3-1 on the morning line, just not a horse I'm going to be attracted to wanting to wager on.
The number 10, Bunchen, is the other Wesley Ward trainee in this race, and we'll see if both end up running. Sometimes Wesley doesn't go. We'll enter both and not run them both. This one, Scott, does have prior experience over the synthetic course at Turfway, and I think the best that you can say about her is that the one time that she sprinted at Turfway was arguably one of the best races of her career, where she was second against maidens, but ran pretty well, chasing a fast pace, or setting a fast pace, I should say, before settling for second. She doesn't really want to go a mile, and her next 2 synthetic starts were around the 2 turns. She's since blossomed as a turf sprinter, though not really good enough to win some of the turf sprints at Keeneland and Churchill that they've run recently. I thought she ran okay last time in a race won by Tales of the Heart, which maybe was just a little bit tougher than that Bunratty Manor race that a few of the others exit. But she is drawn well outside, and she should sit a pretty good stalking trip.
Yeah, the concern that it could work out really well. I think like Walter Rodriguez, maybe with if both the stablemates go and just knowing his riding style on the outside, maybe can sit a real perfect trip here. Could get caught a little wide early, but I do think it's noticeable. We talked about the lack of Turfway form here and synthetic form in general. This is a filly that has shown she likes this surface, which is a huge up, and she's kept good company, despite not really running all that great in a couple of the recent starts.
The number 11, Miss Susan B, is another one where that applies, that she's run some of her best races at Turfway Park in the past. Again, not beating the toughest field. She didn't break her maiden, though, against a maiden special weight crew going this 6.5 furlong distance back in March of this year. Her form since then, running on the dirt and a little bit on the turf, it really leaves a lot to be desired, Scott. She's just kind of taken a step backwards from a form standpoint. Maybe getting back to Turfway will wake her up, but she still probably needs to produce a career best performance.
Right. And the fact that she doesn't necessarily like to get her picture taken, that is something you should take into account too. So even if you think this filly can, is ready to get back to Turfway and run a career effort, underneath is probably the best thing that you can hope for, in my opinion.
And the number 12, Gal Capone, rounding out the main body of the field. She is a horse that wants to be forward early, but she's probably going to get outrun from an outside post, so the trip is a bit of a concern for her. And also, Scott, she's coming off a layoff. She has run some decent races at Turfway in the past, but contending with the layoff, she's been big prices in all of her prior starts. She's got a lot to prove.
She does. The layoff, the big concern combined with the outside post, and a jock that, seems to win a lot of races. I'd be lying if I'm familiar with Jan Hernandez, but I don't think a rider that's familiar with Turfway. So that outside post could be even that much more difficult.
And there are a couple of also eligibles in here. They're both pretty big prices on the morning line. I don't think we have to spend much time on either of those. So let's go to picks for this Wednesday race of the day, Scott. And I had trouble separating some of the shorter prices in here. I think both Wesley Ward runners can obviously win this race. I liked Bunchen a little better at a slightly better price with some of that buried synthetic sprint form from the past. So I put her on top. Kanane is a horse that I have in the mix, so I don't really want to take her at a short price. Just a race where I found it tough to have a strong opinion on anybody.
Me too. I totally agree. Not a ton of form like we mentioned over the all weather. I think the key here will be watching the tote board, watching the exotic payoffs, trying to see which of these horses is value. I could see siding with many of them on a win and bet if their price gets inflated, and I'm going to look to fade any horse pretty much that takes too much money in this spot.
Scott's got it 8, 9, 5, 10, 10, 9, 3, 8 for me in the 8th race at Turfway Park. Opening day this Wednesday. It is the DRF Wednesday race of the day. Good luck if you're playing the races later this week.